Well, welcome back to another episode of Winning Through Culture. Excited to launch a really important episode on the power of partnership. And this is a series, as we have traditionally done in Winning Through Culture, where we kind of unpack some of the key elements of partnership. So one of the elements of partnership we're going to unpack is the importance of trust and vulnerability. And inside that series, we're really going to get into some true stories, some real stories, and practical realities of what it takes to build and create trust and vulnerability in a business, but more importantly, in a partnership in a business. There's very few businesses that are run solo, and there's usually either two partners or a leadership team. And so what we are going to accomplish in this particular episode in this series, Power of Partnership, is on trust and vulnerability. So sit back and enjoy the conversation. Tim and Audrey here, excited to be with you for this second episode of our series on the Power of Partnership. This particular episode is about the importance of trust and vulnerability in partnerships, leadership, and company culture. So welcome back, Audrey.
Yes, thank you for having me for episode 2.
Well, there wouldn't be another episode if it wasn't the two of us. So this isn't Winning Through Culture, but we could use it on Winning Through Culture. I think about this issue of trust, and I think about some of the things we talked about in the first episode. So if you haven't watched that, I'd recommend you go back and do that. When I think of our relationship and the work we've done over the years. Mm-hmm. At an early point, there was a trust that we established. And I kind of distinctly remember how we got there. I'm curious what your recollection of that is. But, I think that's one of the reasons why our working relationship, partnership has worked so well together, is the ability for us to trust one another, the ability to be vulnerable with one another, and the ability to be really honest with one another. In some cases, I think more than most people would think, wow, that's pretty jarring. We even had one of those moments yesterday, which I thought was kind of funny. I was like, wait a minute, you always tell me the truth.
Right.
But you revealed something that was on your mind that was good. We had a great conversation about it. When you think about the evolution of our relationship and trust in leadership, kind of where did you see that start for us?
Yes. I believe trust is, as everybody believes, built over time and built through situations. And so when I first started working in the organization, my main function was in a really important part of our business, which was new business. Yep. And so in that realm, you and I had a lot of communication together.
A lot of interaction.
A lot of interaction. We were, without saying it, we were equally yoked to the same goal. And I think one of the things that was really important in our evolution of trust is at the very beginning, you're not sure if you guys are both running in the same direction. And if we're running in the same direction, equally paced. And I think when we uncovered that we were both going towards the same goal through different mediums and methods, I may not get to the goal the same way that Tim does, but we're going to land in the same spot. It was very illuminating and opening up the door for trust. Because up until then, in the absence of information, people make up stories and
they're never positive.
Right. They're never positive. And we always go to the worst case scenario. And I think, for us, what really defined beginning a trusting relationship was one, my actions and activities were aligned with what Tim's goals were. And at the time, we were really trying to accelerate our footprint in the whole life space.
Yep.
And so as I was moving and making sure that business was being placed from that perspective, I think that earned a little bit of your trust. Now, where there was an opportunity for us to get better was how we communicated about that and how we got to that, right? Tim was wanting to do things in a certain way, and I wanted to do things in a certain way. And I think that caused a little bit of friction at first, right?
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. And I'm sure there was frustration on Tim's part as well, because I wasn't doing the things in the manner that he wanted to get them done. And I'm thinking, well, I'm getting to the same result, let me do my thing.
Get out of my way.
Get out of my way. I think my methods work really well. And so I think that's really important when you're establishing trust in a relationship. It's not just, I can't go to Tim and be like, just trust me. I have to show him that I am aligned to his success.
Well, you can actually do that now.
Right. We can do that now, right? But at the time is I have to show Tim that I'm aligned to his success. Because if you think about this, Tim at the time was a solo business owner with the weight of success and the weight of liability on his shoulders. And so it was not lost on me when you hold that much just singularly in your hands, it's very lonely, right? And you have to protect it. And so it's really important to be able to surround yourself with people who will help hold a little bit of that success or a little bit of that liability for you, so that it's not totally on your shoulders. And I think that was something that I recognized early on in our working relationship is that, you had a lot at stake in this organization.
There was a lot going on during that time.
Right.
For sure.
And so, what is it that I can do to help us be successful and help us crest that? So that's what I would say at the very beginning is we're both trying to learn each other, learn each other's motivations, and then really figure out Audrey, are you doing this for Audrey? Or are you doing this for the organization? Or are you doing this for something else? Or are you doing it for Tim? And, my answer is I really want the organization to succeed. I really want Tim to succeed. And by doing that, I get what I need in life to feel fulfilled. So,
well, I am fond of saying that adversity is a great teacher and that, or failure is a great teacher in the sense that you learn a lot more from failure than you do success. And that leadership and character can be both built, but are certainly revealed in adversity. And we'll come back to that. But I think that one of the things you said that really struck me is we were at a very challenging time in the cycle of the business to the point where one would argue I should have gone out of business. And obviously I don't want anybody to know that.
Right.
Because that's not really good for business when people are like, oh, what do you mean you're going out of business? And you certainly don't want your competitors to know that. The sharks start swimming. But I did, I had a burden I had to share. And what we had been able to build up until that point, which was through two things you said earlier, be impeccable with your word and do what you say you're going to do. And then have that communication. And, I was able in that juncture of our, journey, we were definitely at an inflection point. We had to really retool the finances of the organization. And I needed somebody to do that with. I mean, my natural style is I prefer to work with someone versus just in my head on my own. And you were there to really walk through that with me. And really, you were the first person I had worked with, and candidly, the only person since then, because we've had some other situations where people had privy to the finances where there was no judgment. It was like, hey, let's figure this out. Let's build the models. Let's do what we need to do. And I think that adversity built on the foundation of trust we had. Because again, you were telling a story about you were doing something one way and I was like saying, hey, you should do it this way. That was my leadership naivety, which I've since learned is if you put somebody in charge of something, as long as they're getting the result, let them do it the way they're supposed to do it. Don't tell them how to do it.
Right.
Micromanagement doesn't work, especially when you really don't know what they're doing. So all of that to say, I feel like the trust was built through some moments of adversity. And in that adversity, ultimately, you got to be vulnerable. Because I was like, hey, we weren't out of money, but we were not in good shape.
Right.
And this was a long time ago. So anybody listening to this, don't be concerned.
Yeah.
This was over a decade ago. It was not that long after we started working together. It was the tail end of the financial crisis. We were able to kind of navigate through. And that's when I really knew in those moments, I was like, all right, I can count on Audrey. She's not going to judge me, as a leader, especially when you're a leader by yourself. You get people around you that either think they're smarter than you or judge you because they can do a better job. And that was one thing I never had to be concerned about with you. You were there as a good sounding board. You would definitely tell me what you thought, which I always jokingly say is good because, you got to hit me with a 2x4 sometimes. But yeah, I definitely feel like that trust and vulnerability has kind of made our relationship uniquely what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a hard thing to develop in a partnership. But again, I think that underlying adversity is a really big component of it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to something we like to do together that some people think we're crazy for, which is Spartan races.
Yes.
So a Spartan race is an endurance obstacle race. We had a few folks in our firm that were doing these races together I was a part of that group. And I think we did 3 races and everybody else quit. And they said, this is stupid. This is crazy. I'm not doing this anymore. And I was hooked. I was like, well, this is fun. It's hard. It's challenging. It pushes me. So I continued to do it. And then one day you and I were having a chat and I encouraged you, you should try a Spartan race.
Right.
And you were like, you're crazy. I don't think so. And then again, you came back a couple days later and said, you know what? I think I'll do that. Of course, I took you on the hardest Spartan race, not intentionally. I just figured, well, if she's going to do a race, the next one's coming up. This is the one we'll do. That was a lot of fun because at the end you said, I'm never doing that again. But we have now done
15?
At least 15. Yeah. What's that experience, just curiously for you, been like?
Yeah, it's very interesting is I never played competitive sports. So I don't have the experience of being on a sports team in a competitive standpoint, right? Where you're trying to win and, so at first it's very intimidating doing one of these athletic races with somebody else, right? Because they see the best that you can do and they can see the worst that you can do. And so I think the very first thing that comes to mind was I was pretty intimidated. Man, I'm not in great shape. Did I train for this? Am I strong enough? I'm not a great runner. All these I'm not. And ultimately at the end of the day, I never wanted to let somebody else down. And so that was one of the things where I was like, oh man, am I going to drag Tim down and just make this a miserable experience for him? I don't want that, right? But then at the same time, it's like, this is something different. It's challenging. And at that time, we had worked together for 10 plus years. Yeah. And so there had already been that foundation of trust that had started to build and things, from that perspective. But you put trust in a different environment, a different atmosphere where you're not just like, using your brain. You actually have to be physical in these races, which really shows you your own limitations. I've always been somewhat smart. I've just never been athletic, and so, when we did that experience together, I think it really solidified the power of partnership and trust in this respect is, and it goes back to that adversity piece that you were talking about. When you are with somebody who's not good at something, you really get to see how others react. And you can react in a number of different ways. One, you can pull away from them and not include and have them a part of something. Or number 2 is you can rally around them and find ways to help them be successful. And I think that's the piece that came out in that particular race is I was not good at it. I am not fast. I'm not, at the time, was not as strong. And so, you're really vulnerable in that spot because I can't think my way out of this. I have to move, right? I can't just be like,
and you can't quit. There's no offer.
Right. I mean, it's not like be like, oh, no.
Once you start, you got to finish.
Yeah. It's not like,
Eventually.
tap out, it's like you've got to get to the end point. And so that was really a humbling experience because I can't talk my way out of it. I can't think my way through it. I have to do it. Yep. And so that's the thing that I really appreciated about, kind of that dynamic in the Spartan races is that you don't have to be great at it. We just have to finish. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things and obstacles I don't do, right? I can't do the monkey bars. It's not that I can't do the monkey bars. You should never say can't. I fail.
You haven't put in the training.
Right. I haven't put in the training, probably not will, but that's the thing that I think is really interesting about the Spartan races is it really allowed us to be like, look, we're in this together. And at the end of the day, the goal is to finish, however, whatever finish looks like.
In one piece.
Right. And whatever finish looks like. And at the flip side, I will be, and I always say this, I'll be honest with you. I'm always honest with folks. Is it makes you be a little bit better than if you were doing it by yourself. We just ran a 5K a couple weekends ago.
Yes.
Again, not a runner. My knee hurts. I'm old. Things fall apart. And, if I had been doing the 5K by myself, I probably would have walked a lot more than I did. But I was doing it with Tim. And so I was like, come on. We want to do a great job here. So I'm going to put a little bit extra into this. And so that's really what the power of these races have been for us is, you see where we're great and where we're not great, but you do a little extra. That's in my opinion.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I think, when I was racing by myself, it was not the same experience. I was challenging myself and doing all that stuff. But I think what I learned as we did this together is, again, adversity, the shared experience of that kind of adversity, because, some of those races just flat out kind of sucked.
Right.
And they're pretty rough. I mean, we had one that was 100 degrees and we've had all kinds of interesting conditions, but it's an accountability, mm-hmm. back to the power partnership. There's an accountability to, and again, honoring my word, I said I would do this. Let's go do it, and let's do it to the best of our ability. And I think for us, the other lesson we've learned is we always, before each race, establish what's our goal, mm-hmm. what's our objective. And we give ourselves a little bit of grace in that, it might be we want to finish in a certain time. It might be we just want to finish.
Right.
It might be that we want to try and do as many obstacles as possible. And there's some goal, there's some objective that we pursue. And so I kind of brought it up because we were talking about adversity. I want to come back to something, but I just thought it was an interesting little sidebar that, partnerships, like ours develop not through a bunch of success and ringing the bell and all mm-hmm. this, that's great stuff. You want to be successful, but it's usually the hard stuff that
it really is. Yeah.
You build the bond and the relationship and the trust. And so, one of the things I've been reflecting on as we've been having this discussion, and certainly in our last discussion, is we've been together a long time, mm-hmm. 17 years. And a lot's changed in our world. The workforce, we went through COVID and all the fun stuff there. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of leadership styles and the evolution of our leadership through those time periods and what you've kind of witnessed or seen for both yourself or us.
It's a great question. So, I think one of the greatest superpowers that any leader can have is self-awareness, mm-hmm. knowing who you are, accepting who you are, and for lack of a better word, even celebrating who you are. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of times leaders in general think they need to show up in a certain way, be a certain way, act in a certain element, all of the things that are really not authentic to themselves. And that's why I, as a side note, really love authenticity as one of our core values, because that's really important to me, showing up as you are. And so early on, I think in my step into leadership, it was earmarked with a thought of being inflexible and strong and strong can mean a number of different things: strong-handed, heavy-fisted, because that's what I thought.
Unyielding.
Yeah, unyielding. That's what I thought was really important. And over time, I think that did not behoove the organization in its, evolution and growth itself, because we work with entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Our advisors are entrepreneurs. They're building their own businesses. And so you have to learn to be able to adapt to the audience that you're serving. And so I would say, one of the things that I think really helps in the power of our partnership is our different approaches to leadership. And again, as I was thinking about today and just reflecting on leadership, I think a lot of times people think one avenue of leadership is better or the best or, must be. Or if one is different, then it's not good. And I would just really advocate, of being open to the pluses and the opportunities in all of the leadership styles, because there is a place and there is a need for each of them in different situations. So, that's what I would say I think is really powerful for both of us is, one, being very self-aware of who we are, right? My leadership style is not going to show up as Tim's.
We're very different.
Tim's is not going to show up as mine. But when we blend them together, what a magnificent presence that is for our organization. And I think our ability to soften some of the pieces that we hold on to in our leadership style or maybe adapt is it really also a very powerful thing as well. And I think that's, one of the elements that I've learned over the years of being authentic and vulnerable enough to say, ooh, that didn't show up well. How can I do that over? Or think of a situation and say like, that was not my best self, or I've learned something from this. How can I apply that moving forward? And that's the thing that I truly appreciate about working with Tim is, boy, I have made a lot of mistakes, right? We all do. We're humans. That's the world that we live in. And, learning from those mistakes are truly valuable. But instead of, putting the thumb down and being like, remember when you did this, or, oh, I'm going to assume you're going to do that again because that's who Audrey is. You've always given everybody the opportunity, including myself, to show up a little bit differently the next time with the information that they have. Yeah. And so that's where I think, different styles of leadership are important. Blends of styles of leadership are important. But most importantly, you have to know who you are, how you show up under stress, how you show up under gratitude, and how you can complement other people that are in the room.
Yeah, I give grace because God knows I need lots of it. I think that, and you know this, I am a big fan of leaders that are self-aware. I think one of the biggest challenges in leadership is people don't know who they are and can't even lead their own lives, and then they want to go off and supposedly lead other people, which usually never ends well. Mm-hmm. That a factor of self-awareness being as critical as it is, I think ultimately from a partnership perspective, it allows you to be you and me to be me, knowing that we're very different leaders.
Correct.
And some people see that. Some people don't see that, but I'm usually quick to tell people, no, we're very different people here.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think is unique to our relationship that works well. When you think about those leadership differences and the evolution of our leadership, are there any things that kind of stand out to you, Audrey, that you've changed as a leader in? I certainly know mine, which I'm happy to talk about. But yeah. What where are the areas you feel like you've made changes or adaptations.
Yeah, and I think this really helps to bolster the culture of your organization as your leadership kind of changes. One of the things that is so important is learning the balance in transparency. And working to not keep everything close to the chest, but then also being able to share and give that direction. And I think, one of the things for me from a leadership style that I'm very keenly aware of is I'm a let's go, let's attack it, let's just hit it and get through. And the truth of the matter is there are times and places where that is necessary in a culture, right? When you're in crisis, when you're in financial crisis, I think back to those times where it was necessary to
get
be
into
bold
action
and
fast.
get into action fast. At the same time, during times of economic improvement, of growth, some that may be jarring and disruptive to a culture. And so, it's really important to be able to tune what the organization needs and have your leadership reflect that. And there are times when you have to get back kick it into growth mode. And, it's learning what type of boldness is necessary. Because I would say that I am somewhat of a bold leader. I like to tackle ideas, tackle thoughts, tackle things, and kind of move forward from that perspective. And so it's trying to figure out what is the boldness that's needed, what's the softness that's needed to help the culture continue to grow and move forward. And I think, the interesting thing I would say, I think both of our advisors and our staff as well, our staff are there to help support our advisors' growth in their practice. And so constant change, constant disruption, constant, kind of moving directions creates this very unsteady and uncertain culture, which then leads into the performance of our staff folks, which then, kind of bleeds into
Cascades
our advisors,
from there.
right? And so it's really being intentional about how we show up and when it's needed. I'll give you a great example. Last year, we had a challenging year, right?
Yes, we did.
And for our staff, it was very challenging, right? Because we didn't hit the goals. It doesn't feel good. At that moment, I needed to be a little bit bolder as we came into the new year in inspiring the folks to, stick with us while we moved through kind of that doldrum of tough year, right? But what comes with that is you have to have new ideas and have to be able to implement those new ideas. And so there is a boldness that comes with that. And it's being clear with the staff. It's being clear with the advisors of how we're going to show up. We're having a better year this year as a result.
We are, for sure.
And so that's where I would say, as you and I kind of pass the baton of leading different initiatives, where I may lean into a little bit more of your style in areas of, when we think about the COVID period, people wanted stability, people wanted consistency, people wanted to know the doors are going to open on Monday, I'm going to have work to do, and life will move on, right? That's what COVID needed. And from there, we needed to adjust the style a little bit to get us through that lull. Yeah. And so that's where I say, passing the baton back and forth between us in leaning into our strengths from a leadership perspective is something that's super powerful. But the thing that underlines all of that is you have to be vulnerable enough to say, like, yeah, I'm not good during that time period. I need your help here. Or, yeah, I'm not great at that time period. I need you to be bold here, Audrey. Or, Tim, I need your stability and consistency here to get us through that time. And that's what helps to continue to feed into the culture of the organization. Yeah,
and I think that's the key is without any self-awareness and the ability to talk to one another and really lean into each other's strengths with a full awareness of what we might not be good at and what might be needed in the moment, that's what makes a huge difference. And, I think your point, we were having a conversation, it may have even been earlier this year, and you were like, we did a really nice job in the COVID era of kind of providing that, but we really need to be back in growth mode. And we got to shift the way we do things. We got to put more urgency in the equation. We got to shake it up a little bit. And, that's back to your point. I think your style lends itself well to the boldness and the action and to get moving. And again, think of some of the initiatives that we tackled this year under your leadership that candidly I and others struggled to get moving. That was another thing you were like, yeah, let me give that a shot. And, you had to herd some cats and some strong personalities and some different opinions and get them all moving in the right direction. And you did that. And again, I think the difference was you came in a more directive, bold perspective saying, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to do it. And we're not going to just sit around and talk about ideas anymore. We're going to put these ideas into action. So, Audrey, you mentioned some of the adversity of 2024, which was a rough year for us for sure. And, we've been through a fair amount of transition. The pace of play is very high. The change factor has been pretty crazy for the last 5 years and probably not slowing down. There was a particular element of our business that we were struggling in, and a really important element of our business, which is the development of our new advisors. And again, I have tried some different things, different people, let's do this, let's do that. You and I sat down and you were like, again, back to our previous episode, I think I'm ready for this challenge. I think I can do this. I think when we talk about trust and vulnerability and leadership, what you did from there is a beautiful illustration of what all that actually means. Because I had to trust, okay, you know what? Audrey's going to step into something, as we talked about in the last episode, that she hasn't done before. Working directly with advisors. You've worked with advisors, but not directly in the sales capacity with advisors. And she's going to take a part of the business that some days I wonder is so broken it can never be fixed. It just is what it is because it's a challenge across the industry. Talk a little bit about how you approached that challenge or opportunity, as we like to tell each other. It's an opportunity. At getting our business of bringing new advisors into the business successfully. One thing to bring them in, it's another thing to bring them in successfully. Kind of what you did to make that be the success it is today.
Well, thank you, Tim. When you look at our business, there are a number of ways that we grow. And one of the most important ways that we grow is by bringing new people into the industry. We always are looking to add quality people to the organization to get introduced to the profession and start building their business. And one of the things up until that point that had been working well is we had been able to identify really good new advisors in the community and had invited them into our organization. And that's through a lot of work with the recruiting team of refining, the ideal candidate and really finding those people. So it's not lost on me when you find the people, it's like, okay, then what's next, right? They don't just magically become successful.
Be nice if they did.
Right. And what I would say is over the 17 years that I've been in the organization, I've seen a lot of ebbs and flows of how we have brought new advisors into the organization. And there was one thing that was very clear to me as I approached this project was we wanted to make these advisors fee-based financial planners as quickly as possible within their first year of coming into the business. And in that, you have to be super intentional of communicating that expectation or that desire to these folks early on in the process, which our recruiting team did an amazing job with. Everybody was very clear about that. So that what happens with the next step? And again, this is where my experience of living through many great advisors growing in the business and many great advisors not making it into the business and wondering why. And it is not lost on me early on in the business. It is a high contact sport. And it's not just a high contact sport for the new advisor, it's for whoever is leading that. And so it was really important to me to get very integrated and ingrained in that program so that I knew exactly what I needed to staff for. I was able to clearly articulate a message and hold those folks accountable and consistent. One of the things when people are coming into this business brand new, not having any experience, is they need a consistent message day in and day out. And so every day at 8 a.m., we were on the phone, or I was on the phone with the new advisors talking about their activity, making sure that there was a consistent message of expectation. And then curating a training program to help to fill in those gaps of helping them each day to help grow their business. And really what it was about for me in those early days of trying to figure out how we wanted to have our development program fully aligned was being consistent. And that, I would say, it's just like anything else you do in the world. If you want to get better in the gym or get stronger in the gym, is you have to be consistent. And I think I leaned into, I take my health, I say very seriously, like somewhat seriously, like medium, I don't
It's
weigh
important
out.
to you.
Yeah, it's important to me.
And you're intentional about it.
Right, and I'm intentional. So I hired a personal trainer, and I'm one of his clients that doesn't miss training sessions often, right? I'm there every day. I am consistent. I am at the gym. I'm warming up. I'm ready to work out. And so I wanted to apply those same principles to our new advisors. So every day I was there, even if I was tired, even if I had something else that I needed to address at that moment. It was so important that those advisors had 100% of my attention. And what we had curated out of the many years that I'd been there is a great language foundation and program. So it's not that I had to come up with new language or a new approach because, the fundamentals don't change over time. It was just implementing them and implementing them consistently and with passion and intention. And that's, I think, what really helped me hone in on what we needed to have in that role. And after a long search, we have aligned the right person into that role to continue that journey for our advisors. And I would say, the hard work that, everybody put into these new advisors have paid off. I mean, it is so amazing to be around these young folks, how they've created a community for themselves. And that community started with 8 a.m. phone calls every single day of the week, except for Saturdays and Sundays. And being at the planting phase training every single Tuesday, and making sure that there was meaningful information to give them, not that they were just showing up to show up. And those people who leaned into that training, leaned into that accountability, really flourished. And that's something that I'm really proud of because it's interesting. It's when you have been around the conversations and the language and the development and the training, and then it kind of comes into your lap and say, okay, bring it forward. All of that time and that experience of sitting in the leadership conversations, sitting in all of our trainings over the 17 years that I've been there, I've been able to actually put it into action and have a passion for it. What we are training, what we are doing, I believe in every single day. And for our advisors, it is so important that I instill that passion into their lives, into their conversations, because the truth of the matter is in your first couple of years, it's tough, right? But they're not alone. And that is what our training program has brought to the table with our new advisors. And I am so excited to see it continue to grow. And that's something that I would say that was really important to me. It was something new. Something that I had never done before. And at the same time, I was able to apply principles in different parts of my life and the experience that I had over the 17 years and feel passionate about it and feel conviction about it. And that leaps off the page when we're working with those young folks.
Yeah, and I think the key thing that you did a fantastic job of was creating, through the consistency, trust with those advisors. I mean, we both know our profession has a bit of a problem with firms making claims or promises they never intend to fulfill or have no way of fulfilling. And that is very important to us, that we don't be one of those firms. We want to be who we say we are and be integral with our word. And I think that's one of the things that you did an amazing job of in this case, is the people that through that recruiting process were told something was going to occur and happen, and you showed up consistently every day. And I do remember you did it for a while, and I was like, man, I don't know if I could do it every morning at 8 a.m. And you were on it. And, I say that
it was a privilege to be on those calls.
Well, I know.
You know?
And I know how excited you were. I know how serious you took it. You really leaned into, this is going to be a great experience for these people. We're going to deliver, because we had a great message.
Right.
And up until you getting involved, candidly, we were struggling to fulfill that message. We had the intention.
Right. And here's the really beautiful thing that has happened, over the year that we've really tried to curate this program is I have never had so many of our tenured advisors raise their hand to be a part of that training. And it is incredible awesome. Because, this leads into parts of our vision for continuity, for succession, for digging deeper into advisors' practices, because they are now curious about these young folks who are passing their exams, who are hitting milestones, who are building a practice, who are leaning into fee-based financial planning. And it just really leads in to our vision, which I know is going to be our next conversation in the podcast. But it's been a magnificent, piece to watch all of these folks build together, and to see our tenured advisors raise their hand and want to be a part of that as well.
We've done a nice job of it.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
As we kind of wrap this up and get ready for our next episode, just on the power of vision, anything, maybe parting comments just from a general leadership perspective on building trust in a culture?
That could be a
another
20-minute conversation. Yeah, another part 2 of the episode. Here's what I would say that is so important, and I use our example as kind of my guideposts, or into kind of working through this, is the most important thing to build trust is be able to be vulnerable and to be able to really see yourself for who you are. And when you can do those two things with somebody who accepts what your vulnerability is and how you show up, that builds that baseline, right? We're not pretending to be somebody. We're authentically ourselves. Here's me. Here's you. Here are my strengths. Here are my opportunities. How do we make this work together? And that's something that I wish everybody could experience, because it's very freeing. When, I know Tim very well. Tim knows me very well. He knows that my leaning is towards always to help the organization, and that's the same for his. I'm not out for myself. I'm out for the organization. He's not out for himself. He's out for the organization. And that is really, I don't have to cloud my thoughts every day with that. It allows me to be clear in the vision of the organization and what's best for our advisors, what's best for our staff, so that they can continue to grow and flourish and be successful. It is not lost on me that every day when the doors open of the Pelora Group, we are providing a means for people to support themselves, 46 staff people and 124 advisors, so they can provide for their families, they can live a good life, and they can build something amazing, right? And you can't do that if you don't have a partner beside you that you trust, that is equally yoked in the vision, equally yoked in the success, so that every day I feel great that I can help make a difference in the people in our lives and the people who are a part of the Pelora Group. And that's what gets me excited every day. That's what makes it a great day every day. So I
think that's a really good spot to just end on, because that was a very strong statement. Thank you for kind of sharing your insights. And again, I think the whole notion of trust, vulnerability in a partnership is critical. You said something there at the end that I do think is so important, and that is and you and I have talked about this even when we're hiring people, are their values aligned with the organizations and ours? Because if they are, great things can happen. But if they're not, it's probably not going to work too well.
Right.
And I think that's one thing I'll put my parting comment is, from a leadership perspective, make sure there's alignment of values, because without that, it's really hard to build trust and be authentic and vulnerable. All right. So as we wrap this episode up, our next episode is going to be more on the power of vision. We're going to actually get into specifically some elements of the vision of the Pelora Group. Again, we are working together now. This is not a situation where I'm like, goodbye. This is a situation where Audrey and I are working together, and ultimately we are blending what has been the vision of the organization, adapting for the future world we see us going into. And Audrey will be sharing a little bit more about her view of that in our next episode. So we look forward to having you join us for that.